adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are at Fossil Butte National Monument, just inside the Wyoming line on the west. This is going to be absolutely epic. I'm super excited because I have been to another site that's connected to fossils in this region, just a little bit south in Utah. And it was absolutely spectacular, but I'm ready to add to that story, so let's go. Now, as we are visiting Fossil Butte National Monument, there are a few things that we should know. It's a semi-arid landscape, and it contains some of the world's best preserved fossils from 52 million years ago. And as we're coming through here, you can stop off right beside the road to take your own picture of the iconic sign, but there's a few other things. They have wildlife viewing as well as ranger and junior ranger programs. They also have a visitor center, which we're going to check out today, a picnic area, a 5.5 mile scenic drive, but it does mention here that that scenic drive starts off with a pretty sharp grade, 17%. So they do not recommend any kind of vehicle with a trailer whatsoever. They also have a nature trail, a historic quarry trail, and hiking along the scenic drive. The nature trail is 1.5 miles and the scenic quarry trail is 2.5 miles. So there's lots of different activities that you can do here. I'm very excited to share this with you, but I thought before we got started, we would check out this sign, because this gives us our first context as to what we're going to see right down this road. It asks us, where is Fossil Butte? And from the western perspective, the steep sides and appearance of a flat top of this thing right in front of us is actually Fossil Butte, but it was misnamed to be a butte. In reality, it's actually a curved ridge, but it has the name Fossil Butte. So that's kind of interesting to see that, but there's a lot more ahead and I cannot wait. So let's go. Oh, there's another sign. So as we're going up this drive, there's a series of these signs that set the context for us. And by doing that, we're able to learn even before we get to the visitors center, which I love because that allows us to have an interactive experience so we can learn about the land and see it firsthand. And one of two signs starts us off by talking about erosion. And it tells us to look south across the valley for the tan layers of the ridge tops. These layers were deposited by Fossil Lake, and we can see them as we look toward the sky. So we're going to look right in this area that you can see here. So just to put it into perspective, you're looking out at the butte and then also the other areas. And as we zoom in, you can see where those lines are. And that's where all of the erosion has happened from the ancient lake that used to be here. And this one talks more about what happened to the lake. It says here that fossil lake sediments of the Green River Formation were in this area. If we were standing in the lake right now and the lake were still here, we'd be 400 feet below the surface of the lake. So this was huge. So if you look around you, you can see all of these pieces like this. But if you look across to the other ridgelines, you can also see those, and you can think of this as a big bowl. Again, look over here, the mountains slope inward like this, and it just holds the water all the way around. It goes on to say a little bit more about how the fossils were formed and how that we found certain things as a result of different layers within these mountains. So the rocks of this particular formation are composed of silts and clay, as well as patches of gravel. So when they find these, they know that they're likely to find some kind of fossil in that area. Why did the lake dry up? Well, I'm not exactly sure yet, but maybe we'll find out as we continue to go down this road. It looks like somebody's coming from the visitor center. They probably had a really good time, so we're gonna have to go find out what exactly they learned. Oh, this is neat. As you're going down this roadway, it gives you a timeline of history of the earth and the moon and the oceans. And each part of this has a sign telling you a little bit more. And then you get a little further up and there's another one. And so far we've made it all the way to the crust leading into the ocean. Here is the oldest known rocks. Oh, wow, this is neat. I really like this. That last sign that I just saw said the oldest fossils date back to 3.5 billion years. That is really neat. There's some more up here though, so as we're continuing to drive, I'm gonna keep looking. Okay, there are cells with nucleuses, and then as we keep going, bacteria on land and early ozone. Just think, we haven't even made it to the actual visitor center yet, and we've already learned several different things that go into how this place was formed, from the very beginning of the earth itself to the giant water bowl of the ancient ocean that was here, or the ancient lake that was here. And now we're about to go and check out this visitor center because we're pulling into the parking lot right now. Here we go. Now earlier I mentioned that that one scenic road was not fit for trailers, but you can come to the visitor center. They do have some like RV parking and things like that, so you don't have to miss out. But that's kind of nice that they have that marked so clearly, so early on, so that people can see that, because everybody's kind of recreating differently. I fit pretty much everywhere, but I do have lower clearance. So I'm always happy when somebody tells me, hey, maybe no, maybe no. And the best part about it is these signs just keep on going and going. We've made it to some of the different kinds of things that are in the seas and in the different lakes. And as you can see, it leads us right up to this, which is called the Journey Through Time. Okay, so here we learn that the journey through time has various kinds of things that came along. 9 inches equals 1 million years. Now, before we tackle that, I just wanted to let you guys know that the visitor center hours are available online. Currently, it's 8 to 5:30, so we have a little bit to hang out here. Additionally, there is this really neat building right here that has a display that we can see inside these windows, and this tells us a little bit more about the ancient fossil lake. Starting off, it mentions that fossils from Fossil Lake were likely found by Native Americans, fur trappers, and early missionaries, and you can find an inscription on Fossil Butte dating all the way back to 1851. The first written records of fossils in the southwestern portion of Wyoming were made by the U.S. government-sponsored scientific explorers. And here you can see a full timeline of events that lead us up to more present day and all of the different things that they have found. For example, one of the things that we learned is the visitor center we're about to go into opened up originally in 1990. So it's a long time from whenever they found that first fossil. But over time, a lot of other things that have happened that have been pivotal in making this place unique and special for us all. And so as we're kind of looking through here, we're going to get to see some of those elements that they've incorporated for our educations so that we can understand more about the hard work that's taken to get to this point. So it says here that the 2 top images show fish fossils that are covered in rock in flat light. And then the bottom 2 are from the same thing at low light angles. And so you can see the shadows and it really pops out more, but I'll show you closer. You can see in the top ones, there's not much definition, but in the bottom, you can definitely see that definition. Could you fathom collecting things at night? Well, apparently in the lower light, they stand out a little bit more. So they have in fact done that. But there's a few other interesting things in here that I really am very drawn to. For example, over here, it describes a little bit more of the techniques that they've used. And then we get to see those kind of in action inside. And then over here, it talks about some of the earlier collectors. So there are a few names that are mentioned here. Robert Lee Craig, which Craig came to Diamondville, Wyoming in 1886. He was a coal miner, and in 1894, he lost his leg in a mine collapse. And in doing so, he decided that he wanted to be a commercial fossil collector in 1897 because he had to figure out a new path. And he used his handmade wooden leg, and he walked between his camp and a quarry. He carried fossils in a burlap sack and a wheelbarrow, and then he sold those fossils around the world, and it led to an article that was published in 1934 in the National Geographic magazine about him. Now there is a picture of Robert right here, and you can see what he kind of lived in, and then also his leg that he had created for himself, and how this was probably really tiring work, but it did ultimately net him success. A little harder to see Robert down here, but this is the portrayal of Robert, and you can see how he would work diligently to try to find things again. Now in the back over there, that was David C. Haddenham, and he began collecting fossils in approximately 1918, long before the monument was established in 1972, and he lived in a different part of Wyoming. But he built an A-frame shelter at the base of Fossil Butte, and he used that during the summer to help remove different kinds of fossils from the area. Now, those guys are both right here on this timeline, but you can see, again, there are a lot of other people who were important in this process. Not to mention, you can see a lot of interesting things. The first bird fossil from Fossil Lake was found around the 1900s, and it was actually something that got published because it was such an interesting find for this area. And then also they had the first reptile fossil in 1938. And then just for context, it took them till 1966 before they found the first mammal fossil from Fossil Lake. The first amphibian, 1998. So super recent in comparison to all these others. Really interesting stuff. Now, on the opposite side of our display, we have this, which talks a little bit more about the kind of ways that they would use the nearshore technique. And the organic rich rock in this display is from 18-inch layers, which were deposited in the deepest parts of the water of the Fossil Lake. And the tools and techniques that are shown here in this display explain a little bit of how they work their way through this pretty unique layer. All of that info, super good to have. But that's just the beginning, and now we start down our timeline where I'm going to highlight a few of the things that they found along the way and kind of the timeline of stuff just in general as we move our way toward the bigger building. For example, horned corals came along around this time frame between 480 and 490 million years ago. But as we continue going, sea stars were closer to 470 million. We're going down this, think about this, all of this that is now brushy and looks just kind of barren in comparison to some of the other more lush treed areas. This was all a giant ancient sea. And this visitor center right here would have been underwater. Our very first land plants came between 420 and 430 million years ago, along with ray-finned fishes and millipedes. And just a short time after that would have been vascular land plants. You know, at one point, we didn't have the oxygen that we have today. It was actually somewhere between 410 and 420 million years ago that oxygen finally leveled out so that people could exist, but we still weren't here yet. In fact, if we keep going, it takes quite some time before we get to the people level. We're just going through and through 390 approximately million years ago. Sharks, ferns, conifers are closer to 380. 320 million years ago. Reptiles, amphibians. Still no people, still no people. A little after 290 million, beetles, but not the kind that play the music. No, still no people. This one's pretty interesting, Guadalupe Mountains National Park. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, where are the people? This is the park itself being formed, not the national park being formed. In fact, we just keep going on and on and on. We make it to frogs and mammals. We still haven't made it to people. Petrified Forest National Park, they dated the petrification back to approximately 210 million years ago. They had a Jurassic period mass extinction event approximately 200 million years ago. I think you can see now why science is cool, because the longer that we go around this, the more that we get to see how things contextually they have determined existed based on whenever they find things and how they're able to carbon date them. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, science isn't real. But you know what? I've been to a lot of places, and they've proven their methods to be quite interesting, and I believe them, especially whenever they can show me how that they did it. So as we keep going, 130 million birds, crocodiles. In fact, we make it all the way down to the end of the line here, and that's where recorded history for people are. That's crazy. Homo sapiens, Lake Bonneville, and recorded history all began back to back to back to back to back. But along the way, we went all of this way with all of these incredible things. It reaches around the building to see the timeline of our world. And it's pretty incredible. Like I said before, you don't necessarily have to believe in the timeline. Science presents it to be such, and you know, if they can date back that certain animals died before other animals existed, I tend to believe that. The fact that certain animals would have not survived if those other animals existed kind of leads you to understand that a little bit more. But there's a lot more to this. So we're going to go inside and finally check out the visitor center, which is going to tell us all of the unique things that we need to know about what else makes Fossil Butte pretty cool. Here we go. And I keep forgetting my passport. Oh, I guess I'm going to have to just start a whole project just for my passport. Oh my goodness, this is cool. These are all of the fish fossils. And these are all sea turtles. Oh, this is really neat. I love the fact that they have added this one since it has been discovered in 2023. Even more so is that the documentation of these and everything that has been found is in these little books. And so you can go around and see each one of these and see them in depth, up close, all of the samples of everything. This is awesome. They have leaves. So many leaves have been found, and then fish, water striders, march flies. Oh, this is so cool. I know that fossils aren't for everyone. I know that dinosaurs aren't for everyone. I know that. But by coming to these places, we get to learn something incredible about our past. And because of that, I always do these things. So come along, let's just go with it. It'll be fun. I learned something pretty cool from the video. So the layers are very thin. So whenever they're finding things, they're finding them completely and totally intact as a result of those super, super thin layers. And it is fascinating to see. But just outside of there, you actually see how the fossilization process works. And the phase 1 is approximately 50 million years ago, whenever the lake was just a lake. But then phase 2 is several thousand years later, whenever this lake started to form deposits of sediment. And you can see they're thin layers, which is what causes those stripes outside. And then after you move into phase 3, right here, this is approximately 40 million years ago still, then it starts to compress. And as it compresses, it holds in those fossils and it breaks down those bones and tissues, and they're just cemented basically into these. And then come along people looking for fossils, and they pull across each one of these layers and they chip them out layer by layer, and it reveals things like this. It is so neat. It's almost like a shale feel to it. Really, really cool. In the process, you can see some of these in these items right here. Some of them are more pronounced like this, where you can see every single tiny little bone really popping because it's like a brownish tone. Some of them had decomposed more, so they don't show up quite as aggressively in the print. Others look like these. Isn't this creatively awesome? Like, the world is showing us arts and crafts by showing us how we can learn about the things that once were here. And I think this is really neat. It's like a paper pressing, except for it's in stone. You can also see a timeline of all the different kinds of rocks and what level they would have been in. And it tells you kind of how they were produced, what kinds of things that they would have been good for. And as you look at the layers of the bed, you can see all the different color patterns and colorations, and those are reflected over here as well, as you are seeing each layer of different kinds of sandstone and silt and mudstone and clay, and they just one by one stack up and they form these kinds of like cross sections right here, which ultimately look like this. It just looks like a whole bunch of cardboard boxes that have been pressed together, and you can see the side, but each one of those is a layer of the soil that was deposited in some way, shape, or form. And so things would get trapped in this, and then as it would get compressed, you can see it's just very compact. So they could peel up a layer or 2 layers or 3 layers, and eventually they might find a fossil here. And as we get into places like this, we see magnificent casts of some of the things that they found, and you can see all of the different textures and layers and things that would have been squished down. And we learned on the film that there was actually a fish that they found where it looked like, because of the gases in its stomach, that the head had kind of just like exploded. So they could see like the clear part of the fish toward the end, but the front didn't have any kind of definition. There are also some interesting animals that they have found. There's all casts here of what they have found in the rocks themselves. This one right here and this one, both new from 2023. And you can see the little tiny definition of like the mouth and the wings. Now what makes this more neat is the fact that in the video it said that they would have had to have been covered very rapidly for many of these things to be preserved the way that they are, because in other places they simply just don't look like that. And so it is incredible to see as we walk around each one of these scenes kind of play out and all of the finds. So I'm just going to share some more of these with you, and this is a must-see, guys. I will say that it definitely is something that I wasn't exactly sure what we were going to find, but when I got here, I was just like, wow. As a science geek, sign me up every time for this. This is crazy, guys. So they would have mass mortalities that would happen, and then that's what would result in these layers upon layers of fish. And they have a variety of reasons why they think there might have been mass mortalities, but the fact of the matter is they found several sections of these that resulted from catastrophes. That is crazy. That room also tells us, when we pick up the phone and listen, the story of this area. We talked about before that it was a lake, but they compared it to like the Gulf Coast area. They said that it was kind of tropical. It had lots of different plants and animals, which are also known for like the Gulf region. And so it's pretty interesting to see how now the landscape looks so vastly different in comparison, but also what plants were thriving at that time as a result of that kind of climate. And so that entire room is filled with so many incredible things. And additionally, it had a section where it was talking about predators and how they've been able to tell through some of the fossils also that they had some predatory animals in this area, and that's how some of them ended up fossilized. So also pretty neat. Oh wow, these are incredible. The detail on all of these is just so amazing. This is the most complete fossilized details I've seen. There's also some really great information here about the study of the process which affects an organism after death and what we can learn from that. And as we look through these, you can see various levels of decay, various levels of things that don't quite look completely intact, and then they can draw conclusions from these things as to why that would have happened, kind of like what we learned in the video with the gases expelling from the body. Inside this area you can see one of the things that they're possibly working on, and then on the wall over there other samples and how they might use the hardness scale to detect certain kinds of things that they're looking for, and how they would go through and brush over these sections to see what they can find and to preserve what is intact in these, which is really neat. And then additionally, there is a little video right here where we can watch right here, and it tells us a little bit more about this location and the process. So this shows them clearing out the jointed areas, and then they are able to lift up big slabs. That is so neat. They are then able to take that and then use a template to cut around the fossil itself and then extract that by using some tools. That is just really neat to see how they are able to pull up entire slabs because of those layers. So as you watch this video, you get to learn a lot more. But there's a couple more things I also want to show you before we head out for the day. And one of them is this wall. This wall is incredible. This is like the first wall you see when you come in. Welcome to Fossil Lake, and welcome to, oh my goodness, these are incredible. This one right here is actually new in 2023, and this was a freshwater stingray. And then they also have a paddlefish that they added in 2023. And then a juvenile paddlefish from 2023 as well. This one was the most incredible. You can actually see all of the scales. And this is a gar. This was a donated piece, and it is absolutely epic. There's something about the gars just in general though, because you can see the scale pattern in such a unique, defined way. And so whenever you're seeing it, you see it as the fish appears. And so this one is also a gar, and you can see on the tail fin there how defined even those little tiny bendable pieces of the fin are. It's pretty neat. Last but not least, I wanted to end with this. This is the interactive display here, and you can do a few different things. Look inside the ancient lake by touching the screen or the fossil. And so if you touch the fossils, it shows you the fish as it would have been. So in its little pack of other fish there, this little school. And then there's this one right here. And this one. There he is. Oh, here's another one. Isn't this neat though? It just appears in this little aquarium. And again, you get to touch them and then they show up. And then when they swim off, you can pick the next one. And you can see all of the features of how they would have moved and everything else. But then the best part is up here, they have a little bit more information about that particular kind of fish. And so you can really get in depth. You can have a visual. You can see what the fossil looks like. And then you have a variety of different areas where you can touch. I love this interactive piece. Gosh, I came into the bathroom and there's even more in here. What? This is insane. This is so neat. They have splatters and dino dung, things that help you figure out what's for dinner. Oh, these are interesting. I definitely didn't expect a wall of number 2 fossils in the bathroom. I also made sure no one else was in here so I could film this. This is interesting. It's also apparently the most common fossil that they find. Go figure, go figure. So with that said, one last look through this beautiful, amazing place where you can see all of these exhibits. You can see that there's tons of great information here, awesome brain wrinkles, and ultimately a really neat look into the past. I'm super happy we came out to Fossil Butte today because it was a great way for us to learn a little bit from the past so that we can understand our world is always changing. At one point, this being a lake was just so different than what it is now. And as the world continues to shift and the climate continues to move, a lot of us could be in this position somewhere down the line where our states might be super wet or super dry, and they may look completely different. Now, we probably will not be around to see this level of this, but thinking about the ways that we can impact the world around us to help it out just a little bit is something we should consider. So remember guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time, and I'll see you next time. Bye. This place was epic.